Have you ever sat alone in a cafe, coffee in front of you, headphones in, watching the world move like a movie you didn't audition for, but somehow still love being in? There's chatter everywhere, cups clinking, laughter bouncing off the walls, a couple arguing softly in the corner, a group of friends taking selfies like it's a professional photo shoot, and there you are, alone, completely at ease. Meanwhile, someone walks past, looks at you sitting by yourself, and their brain whispers, "Oh, they must be lonely." But here's the twist. You're not lonely. You chose this. You love being alone in public. And that fascinates people, because society has this quiet rule book. Alone at home? Fine. Alone in the woods? Very spiritual. Alone in public? Suspicious. Slightly tragic. Maybe socially awkward. At least that's the assumption. But psychologically, it's something entirely different. Let me show you what's really happening inside the mind of someone who loves being alone in public. First, understand this. There's a huge difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness feels like hunger. Solitude feels like choosing your favorite meal. One drains you, the other feeds you. When you sit alone in a park while families picnic around you, your brain isn't signaling rejection, it's regulating stimulation. It's saying, I want presence without pressure. You get the energy of humanity without the obligation of conversation. It's like plugging your phone into Wi-Fi without logging into every group chat. Psychologists sometimes call this low-demand social presence. You're near people, but you don't owe them anything. No performance, no small talk, no managing impressions. You can just exist. And existing, truly existing without performing, is rare. Research on introversion and sensory processing shows that some brains are simply wired to be more sensitive to stimulation. Not weak, not shy, sensitive, like a microphone turned up higher. A busy social interaction can feel like standing next to a speaker at full volume, but sitting alone in that same environment, observing instead of engaging, lets you control the dial. You get the ambiance without the overwhelm. Think about it. When you're alone in public, you're not isolated, you're witnessing, you're people-watching, you're constructing tiny stories about strangers, you're noticing the way someone nervously taps their foot before a date, the way a father gently fixes his daughter's hair, the way a barista moves with quiet efficiency. Your brain is active, curious, absorbing. There's a concept in psychology called self-differentiation. It's the ability to maintain your sense of self while surrounded by others. People who love being alone in public often score high on this. They don't dissolve into the crowd. They don't need constant validation to feel stable. They can sit in a restaurant alone and not feel like their identity is shrinking. In fact, it often grows. Because here's something we don't talk about enough. Being alone in public can be an act of quiet confidence. You're essentially saying, I don't need a social shield. Some people feel exposed without a companion, like they need a buffer, someone to justify their presence. But when you walk into a cinema alone and confidently buy one ticket, you're sending a subtle message to your own brain. I'm enough company. And that rewires something. The more you do it, the less you associate solitude with rejection. Instead, you associate it with autonomy, choice, freedom. And there's also something beautifully paradoxical happening. Humans are social creatures. Our brains evolved to survive in groups. Mirror neurons light up when we observe others. Oxytocin flows during connection. So when you sit alone in public, you're still receiving microdoses of social information, facial expressions, tone shifts, movement patterns. Your brain stays socially nourished without the exhaustion of interaction. It's like standing near a campfire without jumping into the flames. And if you've ever felt oddly creative while alone in public, there's a reason. Moderate background noise, like a cafe chatter, has been shown to boost abstract thinking. It's just enough stimulation to spark imagination, but not enough to distract you completely. That's why coffee shops love writers. That's why ideas hit you while sitting at an airport gate watching strangers pass. Your brain thrives in that in-between space. But there's a deeper layer too.
Loving solitude in public often means you're comfortable being observed without controlling the narrative. You don't need to look busy. You don't need to fake a phone call. You're okay with someone thinking they're alone. That level of psychological security is underrated because so many of us live in performance mode. We curate, we edit, we rehearse responses before someone even speaks. Being alone in public is like stepping off stage while still in the theater. You're present but not performing, and that's powerful. Now, of course, not everyone who sits alone in public feels empowered. Sometimes it starts as anxiety. Sometimes you feel hyper-aware, like everyone is staring at you, judging you for eating alone. But the truth your brain doesn't want to admit is most people are too busy worrying about themselves. There's a cognitive bias called the spotlight effect. We overestimate how much others notice us. In reality, the couple next to you is arguing about whose turn it is to text back. The guy across the room is worried about his job interview tomorrow. The group by the window is trying to figure out the bill split. You're not the main character in their story, and that's freeing. For people who love being alone in public, this realization becomes internalized. You stop scanning for judgment. You start noticing beauty. There's also an element of emotional regulation. Some individuals use solitude in public as a reset button. After a draining day, being around life without participating fully can soothe the nervous system. It reminds you that the world is bigger than your stress, that movement continues, that strangers laugh, that things carry on. It's grounding. Philosophers have written about this for centuries, the idea of being alone together. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once suggested that the crowd can both hide and reveal the self. When you're alone in a crowd, you're stripped of roles. You're not the employee, not the sibling, not the friend. You're just you. No script. And in that space, you might meet parts of yourself you usually drown out. Have you noticed how your thoughts get clearer when you're sitting alone in a busy place? How insights sneak up on you when you're sitting alone in a busy place? That's because without direct conversation, your brain switches to internal processing mode. The default mode network activates, the same network involved in self-reflection and imagination. You're not doing nothing, you're integrating. There's also something subtly rebellious about it. In a culture that equates busyness with worth and constant socialization with success, choosing to sit alone in public is almost radical. It says, I don't need a constantly engaged to matter, and that challenges a lot of social conditioning. Now, here's an interesting question. Why do some people feel anxious at the thought of being alone in public, while others feel peace? Often, it comes down to attachment patterns and self-concept. If your sense of identity is heavily tied to external validation, solitude can feel threatening. It removes mirrors, no one reflecting you back to yourself. But if your identity feels internally anchored, solitude becomes expansive. It gives you room. People who love being alone in public often have a rich inner world, not necessarily loud or dramatic, just deep. They enjoy observing their own thoughts. They don't feel the urge to fill silence immediately. Silence isn't awkward, it's breathable. And that doesn't mean they don't value connection. Many of them deeply cherish meaningful relationships, but they understand something important. Connection is sweeter when it's chosen, not clung to. They don't use people to escape themselves. They sit with themselves first. And maybe that's the real heart of it. Loving being alone in public isn't about avoiding others. It's about being in relationship with your own mind. It's about feeling safe enough within yourself that you don't need constant distraction. That's courage in that. Because when you sit alone, your thoughts show up. The good ones, the uncomfortable ones, the random, why did I say that 5 years ago memories. But over time, you learn to let them pass. You build tolerance for your own mental noise, and that builds resilience. So, if you're someone who loves going to a restaurant alone, or taking solo trips, or sitting in a crowded mall just observing life, maybe you're not strange. Maybe you're psychologically attuned. Maybe your nervous system simply understands balance. You want connection, but on your terms. You want humanity, but without losing yourself in it. And that's not isolation, that's integration. Next time you find yourself alone in public, notice how it feels. Notice the quiet hum of being both separate and connected at the same time. Notice how your breath settles, how your thoughts stretch out. You're not missing out, you're tuning in. And if you've ever felt judged for it, remember this: the ability to enjoy your own company in the middle of the world is a kind of superpower. It means you can carry peace into chaos. You can sit in the noise and still hear yourself think. That's strength. So tell me, do you love being alone in public, or does it still feel uncomfortable? I'd love to hear your experience. And if this helped you see your own mind a little more clearly, stick around. There's a lot more inside your psyche worth exploring.